All right, if you're an agent that has a little bit of fear, unsure about what's going to be going on post-NAR, we're going to have some answers for you today. We're going to go through and we're going to talk about some specific scripting, as well as we're going to talk to you about kind of the mindset that you should have right now heading into this post-NAR settlement era where there's tons of opportunity.
Oh, big time, big time.
All right, Tom. So, this is you and I were talking on the drive over here a little bit, kind of what are we hearing from agents? I'd love for you to expand on that a little bit. And what are you hearing and what should the mindset be in this situation?
So I think we should acknowledge first, you look at that report that said 49% of all the agents last year did 0 or 1 transaction. So we're really only talking about 750,000 agents in the U.S. When you look at that group, I took a deep dive recently with F&F, the parent company of all the big title companies. And what I asked them for specifically was, show me the data around who's listing the most houses. Now, you may have seen this because I published it on Instagram. Last year, 197,000 agents listed between 5 and 44 properties, and 5,238 agents last year listed more than 45. So I look at it and I say, there's really only 3 camps. There's the camps that are listing a lot of property, and there's the camps that are trying to figure out how in the world am I going to convince a buyer to pay me a fee, which is, by the way, the wrong question. It's the wrong question. So wherever you find yourself today, know this. I'm 3 decades into this. You and I talked about it. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, no different from when you look back over the history of all great businesses. The vast majority of them started during recessions, depressions, and moments of change. This is none of those except for the last one. It's a moment in change. So if your mindset is, this is the single greatest time on the planet to be alive because I have a ton of value to deliver and I love serving customers and I'm a great problem solver, you're going to love this market. But if you got too comfortable in 2021 playing pitch and catch and constantly being thrown the ball, even if you whiffed, another one was thrown at you and you thought you had skills, you know it. I think Gary Keller said it best. He said, we've gone from a speed market to a skills market. And if you can make that transition, which hopefully we'll work on today, you're going to be just fine.
Yeah, let's do this because I think that is exactly where people are. As I'm talking to agents, a lot of them are like, there's a little bit of fear, and it's just because of the unknown.
Sure.
And so let's answer some of those questions. I know we're going to get a lot of different questions. We're already seeing these questions, and I think now's the time to be being prepared for what's to come. And also, it's just natural to be building those skills now. You talked a lot about scripting. Talk to me about the value of scripting and also the value of doing some role playing. I mean, I think that's a lost art as well.
You know, it's interesting. We've done an event, for the last 2 decades here and then another decade and a half at my dad's company. And it's always been something that I would say most people would shy away from. They're embarrassed to practice in front of others. They don't want to sound bad. And then others just say, well, why would I practice? And my response is, man, I got one of my closest friends on the planet who's a brain surgeon, does like 14 to 15 brain surgeries a week in Newport Beach, and another pal that does about 12 here in Dallas. And all I would say is, thank goodness those guys practiced a lot before they got into work that they do. And by the way, I know real estate agents that make 3, 4, 5, Andy C, 10 times as much as these brain surgeons do. And they've got to go back and constantly work on their craft. So to me, every professional practices. So I guess the question is, which one are you?
Yeah, that's true. And that's where coaching comes in too, because obviously sometimes we got blind spots. And this is the value of your organization. This is the value of having leaders that are setting these up and doing these things on a regular basis. So let's get into some specifics.
Hey, by the way, and the work that you're doing on Inman and your events and everything else, big shout out to you for making a big difference for a lot of people.
Thank you, man. I think, you and I have talked about this. I don't think there's any way you and I could give back to this industry in any way, shape, or form at the level that it's given to us.
Yes.
So it's just a privilege. But let's get into some specifics here. Let's talk about sitting down and having that conversation with a seller. You walk in and the seller says, well, now I hear I don't have to pay the buyer side commission. What should that conversation look like?
So Jimmy, I keep hearing that quite often. I'm curious, tell me what your perspective is. Help me understand.
Yeah. Well,
that's where you want to start.
Yeah. And I just keep hearing on the news, that everywhere I turn, it's just saying that this is the days of commissions are changing and now I don't have to pay that side. So I'm just curious what that looks like.
Yeah, so when you go deeper into those articles, there's a lot to unpack there. So the first thing I would ask you is this: what's most important to you? Is it the highest possible price for your home? Is it the highest possible net, or is it the fee that we charge? Which one? Because
highest net, obviously.
Highest net. So if there was a way, like let's just say, for example, and I'm not saying this is the case, if there was a way for me to get you the highest possible price and not incentivizing agents, you'd be interested in that.
Absolutely.
But in my 22 years of being in the business, I'm yet to see that play out. It's more likely in a market like this with a magnificent home like yours, where the market is hot and we're going to have a lot of opportunity. A lot of people are going to be interested in this property. If we don't use the most important tool in all of business, you know what that is? Incentives. Yeah. Incentives. You mentioned to me earlier you're a school teacher. And if you're a school teacher, and I bet you're a great school teacher, aren't you?
Yeah.
When you're a great school teacher, you understand that after a certain period of time, you now have a very special incentive. One, after 10 years, right? You're now tenured. But the other one is you have that pension. So if that tenure and that pension was suddenly removed, do you think we'd have as many great school teachers? Great point. What do you think? No. So I think the point for the listener is to think about, if you actually go onto ChatGPT and you say, tell me about the superpowers of Warren Buffett, of Charlie Munger, what did they focus on more than anything else when they were building or, trying to engineer growth of a business? Or you go back to John D. Rockefeller, you go back to Cornelius Vanderbilt, they all said the same thing. Get the incentives right. When you get the incentives right, all the magic happens. And what concerns me about what's happening here, and again, even role-playing this morning with ChatGPT, asking, how much do you know about and have you looked at? And if a seller says to you this, what are they really trying to accomplish? And, we look at this and say, they're trying to create transparency by removing it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's so many flaws in this, and that's a whole separate conversation. But my point to you is always use examples that the average person can relate to. And everybody can relate to compensation, getting paid, and incentives. So you can then manipulate that how you want based upon the person you're sitting in front of.
Yeah, no, I think this is so good because, it's the thing, I think I've heard you say this before. I know that I've said it my entire career. It seems like stats will tell, the stories are going to sell. So you've got to have your story where they can understand and put themselves in those shoes. Yeah. All right, so now let's talk about that.
Can I give a little, just a pro tip also? If you haven't taken the time to review your MLS to figure out what percentage of the properties today that are currently listed for sale with a co-op commission north of, say, the average, I can say 2, right? So you're looking at MLS stats. North of 2, it's fascinating because I look at, Colorado Springs, I look at Phoenix, Arizona, I look at Atlanta, Georgia, some of the places where Zillow goes to kind of do their test kitchen, right? So I'm always trying to watch there to see if there's a trend happening or something with the zeitgeist that's making a difference. And in all 3 of those marketplaces, guess what we're seeing? It is like less than 1% offering 0. Less than 1%. Now we know on August 17th, it'll be 100%.
Right.
But I think it's important to do a historical look back to know the numbers in your marketplace. What is the actual average? We just did this with F&F for the entire country. I know what the number is on the buy side in California, in New York, and across the country. You have to know the stats and then be able to negotiate from there.
I think this is great. Where would they get those stats? I mean, you've given that tip before a little bit with either a local title company or...
I would go right to your local title company, and just say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Right. Help me understand. And again, others will say you can pull from the MLS, right? And you can add that data into the MLS and say, now help me understand, unpack this for me, right? That's a little more advanced. Remember, every time you add something into ChatGPT, you do give it to the rest of the world. Right. So just, be mindful of that because it's data.
Right. Okay, it's good. And then sitting in there, utilizing that. Let's talk about the scripting with that. As you're saying that to someone, how would that sound?
Well, so Jimmy, I took the time to look at all the data. So again, we're only talking about up to August 17th because then it doesn't exist anymore. I mean, you could probably say this for another 30 days afterwards and then it becomes a moot point. But today I would say, hey, so Jimmy, I pulled out from the MLS all the properties that sold in the last 30 days. And all the properties that are currently listed for sale. And see, so what we can see here is we're at about 95% of all the properties are offering an incentive for the more than 20,000 agents in our marketplace to bring their buyer to your property. Right. So I guess one of the questions we have to ask ourselves is, if our aim is, as you mentioned earlier, to get the highest possible net proceeds for your home, in my study of business, there's never been a business that had sustainable growth and achieved the kind of record success they wanted trying to cut expenses on the way. What they did is they said, let's give all the incentives to make sure that we can achieve the numbers we want to achieve. So 95%, do we want to disincentivize 95% and only focus on the 5? Or should we say, hey, let's get 100% of the buyers in the marketplace looking at your property to ultimately allow me then to negotiate the best possible net proceeds, terms, and price for you?
Oh, it's good stuff.
It's just that. I mean, and I know like a 1,000 agents would watch this and say, yep, that's exactly right. And here, I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for the one that's like, okay, hold on, let me rewind that and write that down, because I'm literally 75,000 hours into coaching,
right?
And I've role played with every one of my clients. I don't want to say on every call for the last 29 years, but I'd say every other.
Well, it's kind of what you do. I mean, we were doing it on the right end here.
Right.
I know. So, yeah.
Andy C., Tim Smith, Maxine Gellens, Jill Biggs, Lisa Chinati, Tom, like all these legends in the space. You know, they all, hey, how would you say this? How would you say this?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. That's great. All right, let's get one more question, because let's say that seller is sitting there and they say, but, you've told me that we're probably going to get multiple offers. I mean, with my house being as beautiful as it is.
Yes.
Why should we offer it if we're going to get multiple offers?
So again, tell me what you're trying to do. Yes, we can get multiple offers. Do you want to get a lot of offers and drive the price really high? 2 is technically multiple. What are we trying to accomplish?
Yeah. All right. Great. Just circle back to those same basics.
Yeah.
Cover
what
those
are you trying to accomplish? And again, I think the bigger one is going to be dual agency. That especially like you look at many of the marketplaces where the market's really frothy, where it's really hot, the seller's going to say something like, well, Jimmy, like, look, I'm okay if you represent it. Like, I just don't want to, I don't think I need to pay a buy-side fee. And I think that's where you have to get into, what are the rules with your brokerage? What are the rules if anything's changed in your state, always being mindful of state and then your company's regulations. But at the end of the day, I love the line where you say, hey, Jimmy, I could represent the buyer, but let me tell you, after 15 months in the business or 18 years in the business or 300 years in the business, I have found that is always in the best interest of the person that's hiring me today, and that is you, to make sure that I'm not negotiating against you with another buyer. And, I maybe there's the rare occasion in a scenario where a couple's getting divorced and they can hire one attorney, but I've not seen one in my 53 years. Yeah. In almost every case, you need somebody else representing you to make sure that person's negotiating on your behalf. So if I was to procure a buyer, right, that was unrepresented and hadn't signed an agreement with someone else, let me explain what I do. I actually give the buyer to another agent in my office and I say, negotiate against me, good luck. Yeah. Here we go. Yeah. Because my job is to serve you. And if I'm now serving 2 masters, you know who I'm ultimately serving? Myself. And I'm not in that game. I'm not here to list and sell your home tonight and just have a great transaction. That is table stakes for me. What I want is the 5-star review. What I want is when you tell people the story of how I was able to slay the dragons and stop all the problems and make this as easy and stress-free as possible, right? And I ultimately want 5, 6, 7 referrals, because you're like, you got to use my guy, right? How can I do that representing a buyer at the same time on your property?
Yeah, this is such good stuff. Listen, if you're out there and you have watched this, the key thing is to put this into practice, because ultimately the difference in what's going to happen to your business over the next 12 months is going to be how you execute on these things. Best in the business, my friend. Thank you. This has been tremendous, and I know there's going to be value. Listen, reach out, let Tom know how much you appreciate it. Talk to you guys soon. Thanks for watching the video. I specifically chose the video below for you because it builds on the one you just watched. I hope it's helpful, and I'll talk to you soon.